Welcome back everyone. As promised, I'm back with the Morning Star Workbook Solutions, Donne's Death Be Not Proud. In video number 1, yesterday I had discussed 5 short answer questions, and in today's session I'm going to discuss questions 5, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So a total of 10 short answer questions from your workbook. I have solved them. Just go through the sessions and I'm sure these reference materials will help you to frame your own answers. This is question number 6. How has the speaker compared death to rest and sleep? Another important question. How is death related to sleep in the last 2 lines of the poem? 100 to 150 words. Short answer questions. Dear students, do check the pinned comment section for all important video links related to your syllabus. Check yesterday's video number 1, and also subscribe to our channel, tap the bell icon and please share our videos so that you can support us. Now, how has the speaker compared death to rest and sleep? In Death Be Not Proud, the speaker compares death to rest and sleep using it as a metaphor. I hope you all know the definition of metaphor. Metaphor is the comparison between 2 different things, and the comparison is indirect, not direct. A metaphor is different from a simile. Using it as a metaphor to illustrate, to show its temporary nature, death's temporary nature and potential pleasure. Just as a restful night of sleep brings pleasure, rejuvenates, refreshes and soothes men, so should death. This is the comparison. Just as a restful night of sleep brings number 1 pleasure, number 2 is rejuvenating, number 3 is refreshing, and number 4 the soothing effect of sleep on man, so should death. The speaker implies that sleep and rest are thy pictures be. Thy here means death. They represent temporary relief from the challenges of life. When you sleep, you do not have consciousness about what is happening around you. You get a relief from the challenges and toils of life. Death is also a temporary state. Sleep is a temporary state. Death is also, according to the poet, a temporary state of transition. Transition means a change from earthly life to eternal life, a mere reflection of rest and sleep, and also brings pleasure. This is the comparison. Death is therefore similar to rest and sleep. Rest and sleep are therefore similar to death. Thy pictures be. Next, how is the second subpart? How is death related to sleep in the last 2 lines of the poem? The words one short sleep past, we wake eternally mean that after a brief period of sleep, after a brief period, short brief period of sleep, sleep symbolizing death, individuals will awaken to an eternal existence, implying the presence of afterlife. The concept of afterlife is important in this poem, and a continuation of consciousness beyond the physical body. The continuation of consciousness beyond the physical body, that is the immortality of the soul. It is not eternal sleep. Sleep is not eternal, but just a transitory, a fleeting phase, a phase which will pass. And the impermanent death itself will ultimately die after the soul's delivery. The passage of the soul from earthly life to an eternal existence, to afterlife. This comparison, critical comment. Why is this comparison important? This comparison contributes, adds to the speaker's argument against the superiority and power of death. Very, very important critical comment. Speaker is arguing that death is not powerful. Death is not formidable. It is not mighty and dreadful. If death is a kind of sleep, then it is nothing to be feared. Then there is no reason that you must be afraid of death. So, this concept of sleep and death is important. Prepare this well for your examination. And now this is the answer. It's there in your Morning Star workbook. Just check. Understood? This is the answer. To the point answer. Word limit 100 to 150 words. Do a little bit of editing and frame your own answers based on these reference materials. Now, next question. Explain how death is a slave to fate, chance, kings and desperate men. This again is another important concept, slave. Personifying death as a vain and arrogant figure, entity, the speaker deflates death's ego. Death is egoistic and has a sense of self-importance, illusory self-importance, power and grandeur. And here the speaker diminishes that. He proves that death is insignificant. And how does he do it? By calling it a slave to earthly things. It is the speaker's it, that is death, in the speaker's estimation is not the master of anything. It is just a slave. It is not the master of anything, number one. It is powerless, number two, and it is subject to external factors, number three, like destiny, chance, rulers, and people who act out of desperation. And this is contrary to the conventional belief that death is mighty and dreadful. It cannot even act on its own. It does not have the power to act on its own free will. As a lowly slave, the speaker looks down upon death, taunts death. As a lowly slave, its companions are even lower beings, such as poison, war, and sickness. Despite the inevitability of death, death is inevitable. What is the meaning of this? We are all going to die. All men are mortal. Despite the inevitability of death, it is not so powerful and formidable. By calling it a slave, the speaker is questioning its illusory grandeur, sense of self-importance, greatness, illusory grandeur and power. The speaker enables the readers to feel a sense of power and victory over death. People, mortal human beings, must not be afraid of death. And by questioning the illusory grandeur and power of death, the speaker is empowering the readers. And he is defiant. This is another important term, tone of defiance. His defiance is evident in the term slave. एक slave ही तो है, और क्या है? कुछ भी नहीं. He feels authority over death and aptly proves his standpoint. What is his standpoint? Death, be not proud, be not vain. You are nothing but a base, lowly slave to external factors like fate, chances, kings and desperate men. This is another important short answer. Just have a look. Next, it's time for us to read answer number 8. Here it is. Describe 3 desperate elements with whom death is said to hang out. What does it suggest about death? The three desperate elements with whom death is said to hang about are number 1, poison, number 2, war, quotation, number 3, sickness. These lowly beings are death's companions. Lowly beings, important. These are not something great, grand, but lowly beings. This suggests that death, though inevitable, art not so. Quotation, mighty and dreadful, and has various limitations. It is vain, boastful, and its grandeur is just illusory, not real grandeur. It is a slave to the will of fate and men, and as a lowly slave, his companions are base. His companions are base. The speaker feels authority over death. Death is not superior. The speaker feels authority over death. And such an accusation, another important term. This is an accusation. Defiance. Here he taunts. Just observe how I have chosen my words. Accusation, taunts, defiance, base, illusory, limitations. Everything is associated with the poet's, the speaker's perspective that death is not all-powerful. He taunts death with more ferocity, intensity than he did at first. He is directly calling death, you are a slave. You are friends with desperate elements, lowly base elements. He neutralizes man's deep-seated fear of mortality, offering an engaging viewpoint rooted in Christian theology. What is this? I have discussed in the previous session as well. Destruction, harm, suffering. War stands for destruction, harm, poison, and suffering, sickness, are negative aspects of mortality, life on earth, and they intensify the speaker's overall argument against death, not for death, but against death. It is powerless, whereas the soul is immortal. He wants to prove this point. Therefore, death hangs out with base elements. So this is the answer. So by going through these questions and answers, I'm sure you will be able to understand the poem a lot better. I have not yet uploaded the line by line explanation video. If I get time, I'll do that. But for the time being, go through the questions and answers. How is Death Be Not Proud a sonnet? John Donne's Death Be Not Proud is a sonnet that blends elements of both Petrarchan sonnet and English sonnet. Learn these terms. It consists of 14 lines. A sonnet will contain 14 lines, and here also in this poem there are 14 lines, which allows for a concise exploration of the speaker's argument against death. Right from the very beginning, he is arguing with death. He is confronting death. And there is a note of defiance. The poem begins with an octave. A sonnet can be divided into octave and sestate. Octave that presents the argument. Death be not proud, for art thou not so mighty and dreadful. This is the standpoint of the poet. And this is followed by a sestate, 8 lines and 6 lines, set state, that intensifies. In the first portion, presentation of the argument. In the next section, intensifying the argument, and conclusion, third section, with a forceful couplet, establishing the theme, establishing the central theme. And here I have quoted from the text the couplet, the rhyming couplet, the last 2 lines. So, if possible, learn. If it is not possible, no need to quote. You can leave this quotation. No problem at all. just mention the point. Establishing the immortality of the soul and the afterlife. This is the conclusion. The subtle volta occurs at line 9. Now, what is the meaning of volta? Just see, it's there on the screen. These terms and expressions are all related to the structure sonnet. These are new terms, so learn them. The subtle volta occurs at line 9, where the rhyme scheme shifts, indicating a deepening of the speaker's defiance against death. The poem's rhyme scheme begins with ABBA. ABBA, typical of a Petrarchan sonnet, then transitions into CDD, CEE. Learn this by heart, akin to the English sonnet. The blending of forms emphasizes the logical progression of the argument against death. Main point is argument against death, with the final rhymed couplet delivering a conclusive statement. So a cohesive presentation of idea. The rhyme scheme adds musicality to the poem. So go through this answer. Learn the new terms and go through this answer. This is a question on the structure, form and structure of the poem. Just know this. So this is the answer. After this, the last question. Question number 10. Explain the paradox in the last two lines of the poem. Death be not proud, the rhyming couplet. One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death thou shalt die is an example of paradox. What is a paradox? See, the definition is there on the screen. Contradictory terms, juxtaposition of contradictory terms or concepts. Now the explanation. Death is inevitable. People who die do not come back to earth. Still, the speaker claims that death art not so mighty and dreadful. How is this possible? Contradictory. On one hand, death is inevitable. Everyone will die, and one who is dead will never be able to come back to earth. He will be gone forever. Still, the speaker says, death, you must not be afraid of death. Death is only one short sleep, a brief phase. According to the speaker, death is a brief phase, and that those who die wake eternally. That is, experience spiritual awakening in afterlife. Mention this is compulsory. This concept is important. It is the end, okay. It is the end of man's earthly existence. It is also the beginning of his eternal or higher existence. Spiritual awakening in afterlife. He says death shall die. Death does not die in the literal sense. How can death die? If death dies, how will man be a mortal being on earth? People on earth will continue to physically die, implying the ephemerality of life on earth. This term, the transience of life on earth, the transitory, short-lived nature of life on earth, ephemerality, learn this new term. However, their souls will wake in heaven. On one hand, the physical body is going to die. On the other hand, the soul is going to wake up. This is the paradox. Paradoxically, death is described as a kind rebirth. It is not unkind. It is a triumph of eternal existence over the transitory nature of death. Death is just a gateway, a transition. So here, dear students, I have finished discussing 10 short answer questions from your Morning Star workbook.